the end of the questions. What I'd like to do now is introduce our demo artist that I know everybody signed up to see, Suzanne Natzke. I'm delighted to have you here, Suzanne. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Before we get started with the introduction, I did want to make sure everybody has their cell phones muted. You're on mute with your computer. Suzanne, we don't have a huge group. I think it's manageable with questions. So what Suzanne has offered to do is pause periodically to take questions. If you are afraid you'll forget your question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and I'll try and keep an eye on that. And when we break for questions, I'll mention them to Suzanne. Suzanne began painting in watercolor in 2001 and has studied under several local and nationally renowned artists. She is a signature member of the Florida Watercolor Society, Georgia Watercolor Society, and Florida Suncoast. Her work is regularly featured in state and national exhibitions, as well as online shows and publications. Suzanne teaches watercolor and mixed media water media classes, and also offers workshops and demonstrations on a variety of water media techniques. Suzanne enjoys the fresh, transparent nature of traditional watercolor painting, as well as exploring methods using mixed media and collage to develop expressionistic and abstract compositions. Her style incorporates bold value contrasts, a vibrant and harmonious palette, and simplified shapes. Suzanne's art encompasses an eclectic assortment of subject matter inspired by everyday happenings and reflects her fascination with motion, light, and the desire to capture a moment in time. And with that, I'll let you take it away, Suzanne.
Thank you, Linda. Good afternoon, everyone. As many of you are aware, Florida Suncoast Watercolor Society and some of the other watercolor societies that you may participate in have changed their guidelines for the presentation of artwork to include paintings mounted on cradle board. And also the interest in aqua board has kind of exploded, and those are a lot of times available on cradles as well. So what I'm going to be showing you today is a demonstration of how to adhere a painting to a cradle, and all the little things to consider when you're using that approach, and just how to get your piece ready for exhibition and presentation. So the first thing is the prospectus. And when I get a prospectus, I don't just read it online. I print out a hard copy and get my highlighter. And as you can see, I start highlighting all kinds of things, because this is your roadmap for the whole entry process, and should you get accepted into a show, when and how you'll have to deliver it, and how it has to be presented. And so everything's in here, but as Linda mentioned earlier, groups change the rules from show to show. Things are constantly evolving, and so you can't just assume that you know what's going to be included. I recommend that you read the thing early. I know with some big shows, people are in a mad rush at the very end, and if you have a question or a problem, you don't have enough time maybe to get the answer. So read the thing early, highlight questions that you may have, and always read it for every different show. With that being said, I'm going to flip my camera here so we can look at some things. And cradle boards come in different sizes. different widths. This is very narrow. This is a 7/8 of an inch. This is 1.5 inches wide. And this one is 2 inches wide. So you can see there's different sizes. And for juried shows, most of them require you to have at least the 1.5 inch or the 2 inch. That does not mean that you can't put a cradle, or excuse me, put a painting on a 7/8 inch cradle, because you can, but you will have to get a floater frame for that, and Ampersand sells the floater frames that fit just about every cradle size. And so you can go online to Ampersand. They're the same manufacturers who make Aquaboard. But you can get cradles from Flick, Cheap Joe's, Jerry's, any of those places. So the next thing you will want to do is look at your cradle when you get it, and make sure that when it's delivered, it is not damaged. Once in a great while, I've had something delivered where the corner was bashed in or dinged up or something like that. And also, these are made of real wood, so sometimes you can have an edge splintered off or some weird thing like that. I found with this cradle that there's these slats that help fit the boards together, and this one's recessed. There's like a big, it's not flat. There's like a ditch here. And I'm thinking, well, you know, I could maybe fix that. That's not something I would necessarily return. I could put some wood putty in there and smooth it out and sand it, or I could use molding paste, especially if I'm planning on painting the sides. So just, you know, examine your cradle. You can sand any rough edges and things like that, but you want to start with something in good shape. So once you have this out and it looks good, the next thing you're going to want to do is lightly coat the entire surface with gesso. If you plan on painting the sides, paint that with gesso first as well. And I like to use the flat sponge brushes, because it gets things on in a much more even application, and I don't have as many brush marks. So you only need a light coat. You don't have to build up layers or anything. Just put some gesso on there. And the reason for that is because there's lignin in wood, and over time that can leach out and damage your artwork. So it's just an extra layer of protection to keep your artwork looking good. What you do with the sides of your painting also matters, because competitions will usually say that you can keep the wood in a natural state. So with this one, for example, that's the natural wood color. You can lightly stain this with wood stain. Some people I know will put the varnish right over it. So that's a natural one. This one I've painted black, and that's kind of my personal favorite. And I use Golden's Carbon Black. It's a very nice shade. It's kind of got a satiny finish. It's not dull or anything, so I really do like that. You are usually allowed, if you want to paint it, it has to be black or white in color. So you'll need to decide that, because you want to paint your side before you adhere the picture. Any questions on that so far? Okay, so that's preparing the panel. And by the way, once the gesso is dry, I will take a sanding block and just give it a light once over to make sure it's nice and smooth. But if you use a sponge applicator, it shouldn't be a problem. The other thing you have to prepare is your picture. Now, in this case, what I have done with this painting, first of all, you have to choose a size. And this is an 8 by 10. The picture has to be a little bit bigger all the way around than the cradle, which will make it easier when it comes time to trim it. So I made sure I trimmed it, and I also took this and I put the cradle on and I held it up to the light so I could see it's kind of like a light box effect to see, which you can't see here, but I could tell where the cradle will fall on the painting. And I drew some marks with pencil so I know where to square this up when I apply the adhesive. And that's helpful so that you're not guessing. You want to make sure it's on there straight. But the whole point of this is that, let's say you want to do a bigger piece for a show. And if you want to do something like 16 by 20, then you need to have a painting that's about 18 by 22 so that you'll have an inch all the way around to trim off. So keeping in mind the size of the cradles available and how big you need the paper to go with the cradle, you want to make sure you plan that out ahead of time so that your composition will work and you're not cutting off anything important or crowding edges or anything like that. So now I've got this figured out in terms of the layout. And the next thing is kind of a personal choice. But if you're planning on putting things for sale or entering them in a show or something like that, it's kind of a good idea to put some kind of a protective sealant on this that has UV protection. And I would do this before I stick it on here. I can add more varnish later or seal it with wax later, but just, to make sure that nothing is disturbed during the process of gluing it onto the panel. I use this, which is golden archival varnish. And this is in a satin finish, so it's not matte and it's not shiny. It looks just like the watercolor painting. But it's also UV protection, which is really important. And you got to take this outside and shake it for 2 minutes and all that fun stuff. But it dries pretty quick. I do 2 coats. You let each coat dry for 20 minutes, and then you're good to go. So we have the panel ready. We have the painting ready. And now it's time to adhere. For this portion where I'm putting my adhesive on here, I'm going to use a nylon brush. I think it's just easier because I'm going to be using soft gel to glue them together. And the sponge is a little harder to mush it around. This has got a little more stiffness and I can get it on there pretty easily. Now the soft gel it doesn't matter if it's matte or gloss or semi-gloss because it's going to be in between. No one will see it. And I'm just getting a little bit of water on the brush. I don't want too much water, but it helps to spread things a little bit. By the way, this was gessoed and sanded. The edges were painted, so it's all ready to go. And I want to make sure that I get out all the way to the edges and the corners. Because that will be very important. And I'm going this way and this way as I work on this. And I'm just checking to make sure from an angle. You don't want it too thin. You want to be generous, but not lumpy or gloppy, so that there's something to adhere to. So that's covered. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the paper. And I'm not going just inside those lines. I can overlap that a little bit to make sure that all the edges will seal up adequately.
Suzanne,
Yes.
we had a question in the chat. Can you use glue instead of the acrylic gel paste, or is acrylic gel the right way to go?
If you're going to be competing in a nice juried show or putting your painting up for sale, I would say the acrylic medium is the way to go. And the reason for that is it is archival, whereas some glues are not. And I have someone I know who does decoupage or something like that. Not decoupage, what's that stuff? I forget what you can buy it at Walmart. But it's less expensive, but you know, she's just doing it as gifts for family and stuff like that, so she's not so concerned with archival quality. So that would be the thing I would say there.
Okay, thank you.
Now I'm going to quickly just take a tissue and, you know, where I've slapped over the edges, I can just quickly wipe that off, make it neat. And now, make sure I get the right side up. I'm going to place this on, this is a flat surface, and I've actually got it on a piece of plexiglass because my table is a little bit warped. So you want to have a nice flat surface. And I can see it's lined up pretty good with my marks. And then what I would do is get some books and pile them on to add weight and let that dry. The way I learned it years ago, they said, wait 20 minutes and then check it to make sure there's no bubbles. Well, that didn't work out so well because in 20 minutes, the thing was already stuck on there good. There wasn't anything I could do about it. So my advice is wait 2 minutes and check on it and see if there's anything that you don't like the looks of. And then you can pile the books on and weigh it down. Here's the thing about watercolor paper. It's cotton. And so it absorbs the liquid from the gel medium and that little bit of water that we use to put that on with. and it expands the paper slightly. So in about, a few minutes, I will start to feel if something is bubbling up, if it's a little bit loose. And I can take a brayer in these early minutes here and press it out from the middle outward towards the corners and the sides to get it as flat as you can, because that paper is expanding, like I said. I don't think you would have such a problem with that if you're using a 300 weight paper. And if you're using Yupo, which, by the way, you could do this with Yupo, Yupo doesn't absorb any moisture. So, that would probably not give you any trouble at all. So I'm not pressing down too much. I don't want to squeeze out every last drop of glue. You want to give it something to hang on to. But now that I've done that, I want to get that face down and get the weight on it, because it needs that even weight all the way around for all those corners. You can check it again in like 15 or 20 minutes and make sure the corners are stuck on well. You can fix anything like that at that time. Any questions on that so far?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way. So here's one I did earlier this week, and I've already trimmed some of the sides. We're going to talk about this in a minute. Let me just say before we talk about trimming, that glued painting needs to dry several hours or even overnight. With the books piled on there, it takes longer to dry because air doesn't get in. And this one, when I did it, the next morning I took the books off, and it felt like a little mountain range in there after all my efforts to squish it flat and everything. But it was also very cool to the touch when I put the back of my hand on it, and it was not dry yet. So at that point, I left the books off because all the edges were stuck on there good, and I let the thing dry out completely, and it shrunk. That expanded paper shrunk and dried flat, and it's on there good. So don't freak out if that happens a little bit. You can only babysit it so much, and at some point you just have to let it dry. So now we're ready to trim the edges. You can use a razor blade, an X-Acto knife. This is a snap knife. I like these because they're so easy to snap off a dull edge and get a new fresh one. And that's the one thing I would say here is make sure you're working with a very sharp blade, because if it's dull, it can bunch up and give you an uneven edge. This is a cutting mat underneath, so work on a cutting mat or something where it won't be damaging what's below it. And then I'm just going to come in here and go right along that edge very carefully. And get a clean cut. And then one more. Now, if you accidentally chip some of your painted edge off while you're doing this, it's very easy to touch up afterwards. That looks like a clean cut. And there I've got a nice completed painting. And this was done the same way. I gave it 2 coats of the archival varnish before I stuck it on there. And we're all set. So at this point, you can do the final sealing of the painting. And you have a couple choices. You can go with a traditional kind of varnish, liquid varnish, the kind of thing that you would want to get a nice smooth nylon brush and put it on. I don't use this kind of stuff anymore for this because there are easier things that work to me just as well, if not better. But if you use something like this, again, I would stay away from matte. This is satin, which is a semi-gloss, and you could go to a glossy. It's up to you. And this is the UVLS protection, so it's archival. So that's good. And if you use a varnish like this, read the directions carefully, all that fine print, because it gives you a ratio of how much water you can thin it with. You don't want to put too much water or it won't be effective. So you need to know that ratio. And it also gives you tips on application. Normally I would do 2 coats, one in one direction, and then let it dry, and the other in the other direction, and then let it dry. And you just want to gently lay it on. This is not something you know, scrub on and go like that. You want to just have nice, even strokes. But the thing about this is the drying time is, this says 6 to 24 hours between coats. So, you know, if I needed to do that, this could be 2 days before this is done. And then they say not to ship it or put any packaging or anything on it for up to 2 weeks. So that's a long time for this to be cured. And that's why I'm, you know, you can still do that. If you're fine with that, go for it. The other method, though, is the cold wax, and that's that Dorland's wax medium. And I think Golden makes something too. And this is very easy to use. You want to always use a glove. Don't use your bare hands with this. And you just take some and you use a circular motion and rub it right into your painting until you've covered the whole thing. Now, here's the cool thing about this. If you do not use a spray varnish, if you just take your painting and you glue it on and there's no sealant of any kind on there, and you want to use this wax, you can do that. You can put it directly on a watercolor painting and it will not smear it. You can use it on aquaboard. It won't smear the paint because it's not water, it's wax. In fact, this one was done with the wax directly. And you can see nothing smeared. So, you know, this is obviously very easy to put on. It doesn't take long to do this. And once I cover this whole thing, Then I need to let it dry overnight. Give it 24 hours really is best. And then I will do a second coat over the whole thing and let that dry another 24 hours and then buff it with a soft cloth. And that's it. That's all you have to do if you want to use the wax. The only hiccup with the wax is that it is not archival. But depending on what you're doing, you know, and if you put a archival sealant on, it's okay. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yes.
This is Tanya. When you say not archival, do you mean that it's not giving you UV protection, or do you mean that it's not archival and that it might yellow?
My understanding is it's not giving you light protection.
Okay, so it's not giving you extra protection, but it's not going to yellow like wood pulp paper yellows.
As far as I have ever heard or researched, it should not yellow.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Suzanne, we have a question in the chat. What do you use to buff it with afterwards?
Like an old t-shirt or just any soft rag, not a paper towel. You want something lint-free.
Something 5% in it.
Yeah, it just, you know, old t-shirts are great for stuff like that.
Can you spray or archival protection over wax? That's another question we got in chat.
No, you want that underneath.
Okay.
Once you put the wax on, I'm sure there's some way you can maybe get it off, but no, if you want archival protection, then your best bet is to give it a shot of this.
Okay.
2 coats. And
that is, we had an earlier question, that is Dorlands, Dorlands wax medium?
Yes, Dorlands wax medium.
Okay.
And you can get it on Amazon and probably any good art supplier. This is not the only archival spray. There's Cradle has something crystal clear or something like that. I found this one and I really like it, but there are others.
We have another question. Is the wax finish acceptable for most shows?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. Yeah, you have to check.
They say it has to be varnished for a show. Technically, this is varnish. It says archival varnish, so that's varnish. And this is a sealant as well. So you could use the combination of the two and really cover your bases.
Okay.
Now we have to hang it up.
Yeah, I have a question about if you make a mistake placing it, is there any time to fix your mistake of that you didn't put your painting quite in the right spot when you press the cradle down?
Good question. That's that first couple of minutes. You do have movement. It does not dry instantly. My studio is super dry. We always have the AC on at 74 and it's always 40-something% humidity in here. And I have a ceiling fan going. So things dry very quickly. But even then I have a couple of minutes to, you know, play with it. And once that, and it shouldn't take more than that to make a little adjustment. And then once you're committed and get those books on, then it's on there. That's the thing about this technique, which it is permanent. So, you know, now that this painting is on this cradle, that's it. It's not going anywhere else. It's on here forever.
Linda, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you wrap the edges the way it's done in an oil painting where it's painted down over the edges as opposed to just painting them black or white?
Not for competition.
Okay.
Yeah. At competition, they will be very specific to tell you what you're allowed to do with your edges. And I've only ever seen natural wood with, you can stain it with wood stain, or painted black or white.
All right, thank you.
We have another question here in chat. Are there any special considerations for shipping? I would imagine it's easier to ship this than it is a framed painting.
If you're shipping to a big show, you're still going to have to use an air float box. If anyone is unfamiliar with that, it's a special Air Float Systems is the company, and they sell these big shipping crates, and they're beautiful boxes, and they have a foam cutout that you can perforate and lift out the exact size of your painting, so it nestles in there and it's very well protected. And just about all your big shows insist on that type of an air float shipping container. And so you're going to have to do that for this too. And that's fine, because here's the thing, you varnished it and everything, but you still have these corners which are vulnerable, and you have nothing, no glass of plexiglass of any kind here. And you want to make sure that nothing can gouge or scratch this. So you want to take special care. And if you enter a big show, follow their directions for shipping. But just, for smaller projects, for a gift, I have a student who paints her grandchildren all the time, and she adheres the pictures to cradles, and she uses the 7/8, the skinny one, and she just drops that in a padded mailer and mails it. So, and they come through just fine. So,
well, the good news about those boxes, they're expensive, but you can reuse them.
Absolutely, especially if you paint, kind of the same size. If you stick to certain standard sizes, I have like 3 air float boxes for 3 different sizes, and so if I'm going to send something out to a show, I make sure it's one of those sizes.
We have another question here, Suzanne. Would the process be the same for gluing a painting to a canvas?
Yes, it is. I believe so. You cannot use a canvas in these juried shows. They only want the wood cradle, but you can adhere a painting to a canvas. And there is a way, if you get a bubble, canvas has more give to it, so it's a little trickier to get it without a bubble. But I saw in the past, I've seen there's a YouTube video that shows you how to get rid of a bubble if you glued it to a canvas. So I just would not, you can't do it for a show, so, but you could definitely do it for your own purposes.
Okay.
I have a question about if you can you just use the varnish again instead of using the wax for the final coat?
Yes, you could. Absolutely. Yeah, there's been a lot of interest in this wax for some reason. But yeah, you could definitely use the varnish, the spray varnish again. It's on this. This is clear. I would probably want to hit the sides evenly if I did that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
The last thing is wiring it to hang. And there you can get these little D-shaped hangers, and let me get one out here. I ordered a whole package of them on Amazon, and they're shaped like this, and you would just fit the flat end in there, and they send you the screws to go with it. And I have a little hand drill that screws the little D hangers right in there, and then you can wire it straight across, because there's plenty of room underneath to get the thing hung up. You don't want a wire that's really loose that comes up too high on your picture, because then it'll tip out away from the wall. So, and they often, in fact, I think it was in our Suncoast prospectus, they talked about how to wire it, or, usually 3 inches from the top. This is a little less, but it's a smaller piece.
So we have one more question.
Yes.
Someone from Canada who has not heard of an air float box. Where do you get them? I ordered mine online, I know.
Yeah, online. It's Air Float Systems is the name of the company. And you got to put Air Float Systems. But you might also want to put art shipping or something in the Google, because there's some other air float thing. It's all like one word, air float. And they're in Mississippi, and they have all different sizes, and you can customize within the inside of the box to fit your painting, and their customer service is really good.
And most of the big shows, I know, if you're shipping a painting, if you get juried in, they'll send you the information on what box to get and where to order it.
Yeah, if you've ever competed with Florida Watercolor, they give you the website and you get a discount.
So airfloatsystems.com is where you want to go.
I believe so. Yeah.
I have a question. Is it important to make sure it hangs flat?
Yes. So if you look sideways, you see the hanger is inside of that hole. There's nothing sticking out on these edges. You go attach it in here on the inside.
Okay, so from the side view, you can't see it.
Right.
Okay.